Hey party people, this is Jeremy, also known as Gaffer, coming to you with our latest production on Gone Viral from Skullbot Games. As you know, this is our roguelite, which we're doing with, it's kind of a pure RNG dungeon. You're in an arena, you're televised, you kick butt. The more butt you kick, the more the audience loves you, sends you stuff. As our dev streams, we're doing these weekly. They tie in kind of our dev blogs, which we're also doing just because we love our fans and we like to let them know what's going on, and we like to take feedback. Feel free to ask any questions that you like. Feel free to, as well, follow up on our website, www.skullbotgames.com, and leave any feedback that you like, because we like getting it, we like answering it. So, what are we going to dig into this week? Well, what we've done over the last couple of dev streams has been do a bit of a let's play, show what's going on, and first just explaining, hey, what's the game? Then we started getting into more like, okay, well, now what's been happening in the last week or so of development? And even starting to dip into now actually doing development on stream to go fix stuff. So today I'll do a real quick, just sort of a blaze around. But then what I really want to do is go hop in and we'll go dig into some code and kind of show you how the magic is made. It's just the room where it happens. So let's go we'll take a peek at exactly how we make all the rooms where the magic happens. So let's pop in. Let's do some fighting. The cell block. So what have we been working on? A couple of different things. On the art side, our esteemed art director, Mr. Christian Lightning, has been working on getting in all sorts of cool new stuff for assets. He's been knocking out creature variant after creature variant after creature variant, including brand new creatures, some of which may be wandering around here, although they'll also be in gray box mode for some of them. Gray box, for those of you not hip to the dev slang, means you put them in a sort of rough form, untextured, but you can see the animations, you can kind of see their attacks, get a vibe for them, and then you flesh them out to actually make them colored and, non-gray and all that kind of cool stuff. Here we have our nice little psychic room. This guy's a buffer, so he's got to die before his friends will. Luckily, this is just kind of an intro room. Let's see if we can kill you with a trap. Maybe we can get in two trap. Oh, fail. I didn't get nothing out of that. How lame's over is that? Here, you get knocked over as well. Something I added in the other day is the concept of being able to have these traps and things kind of sync up. One of the things that you'll see us adding in the not-too-distant future is being able to have them like completely synchronized. So maybe you got a floor with a bunch of spikes and they're going boom, boom, boom down in sequence. You kind of run along in timing. We've been adding some more puzzle ones and stuff too. Yay, fortitude. Super easy. This gives you 2 hearts. Have a heart. Heck, have 2. I'm never one to turn down new more HP because survivability can be a challenge. Let's get you over here. I, on the other hand, separate from Christian, I've been working on. Can we get you with a double trap kill? Only one. And I got shot on top of that. That was a nice double kill, though. We'll take it. I've been working on pooling of projectiles. What is that? Well, when you shoot a projectile, projectiles happen a lot. And in Unreal, it's not an Unreal thing, in every kind of game, I'm going to try to get some coins here, and I fail. I fail it. Not life, but I'd fail it. Smacking that thing over here to try to get free coins out of it. Pooling, so projectiles, the things we fire. There's a lot of them. They're created very often. They're destroyed very often. And in most engines, creation and destruction of objects is an expensive operation. Not like you pay coins for it, but more in the form of, here, we'll get some coins, speaking of which. It's expensive operation, meaning it takes a lot of time to execute. And these happen a lot. You might imagine that if we were to, for instance, have some drag gun style boss that's spewing out 100 bullets a second, that might well slow things down. Well, if you're creating all these things from scratch, here's a new bullet, here's its color, here's its particle, here's its position, here's how fast it's going, here's how much damage it does. That's a lot of work, and then here's an actor in the world, here's its physics, you set up all this stuff. The bullet flies for like half a screen length, hits a wall, goes, explodes. Well, that was a lot of work for something that got created, lived its brief fruit fly-like life, and got destroyed all in one short pass. So a very standard optimization step you do is to do what's called pooling. So doing that full creation step, making new physics, making new all that stuff, because that is expensive, in the time sense, what you like to do instead is you make them once, and this is also true for things like carnage points, anything that gets regularly spawned in, has a short life, regularly goes away. That pooling is you make it once, and then you hide it. And you're like, okay, little carnage point, I'm going to make you invisible. I'm going to go stick you maybe up in the sky somewhere. And when I need one, instead of summoning a brand new one, I pull one out of that pool. I'm like, hey, you, get over here where this carnage point is going to appear. Whee! It looks like you made a new object, but you just sort of dragged one around in the world, made it appear, make it do its business, and then send it the heck away. Send it back to its pool. So you never have to create them. You never destroy them. All you're really doing is moving them around, showing them, and then when they're done, you hide them and you stick them back in the pool. Get back in the gene pool. This is way more efficient. And it's a pretty common sort of thing that you're going to do. But it's really easy when it's a carnage point. Now, all a carnage point does is that just is going to sit there in the world. Here, die you. Yeah, it's a good thing I got fortitude because I've taken a lot of damage. That little carnage point, it lasted for like a half a second. And there's no state to it. By state, I mean it exists in the world, but really any carnage point is just like any other carnage point. It is a fungible commodity. There's no difference between one and the other than its position, other than is it in the middle of being collected. It's almost stateless. There's very little involved with an individual carnage point. As much as you can tell one fruit fly from the next, the fruit fly thinks he's quite different than his fellow fruit fly, but in practice, one carnage point kind of looks like another carnage point. So, boom, that was actually a good shot for a change on today. So when we pool these things, we do a really simple thing. These carnage points appear. They go away. Either I pick them up, or they fly back to me, or they dissipate over time. And because they're so simple, we pool them. Those carnage points really exist in the world in a pool of like 500 of them, and I swap them in and out. It's great. This is why we run at, on average, we're usually running like 80, 90 frames a second while we're streaming, while we're doing all this other stuff. Pooling is the kind of trick that helps us get there. But projectiles, on the other hand, yay, scout armor. Wow, that's a really loud particle on the back. The scout armor lets me move fast. Speed is life, so I'm quite happy with that. Even though it's a short playthrough, I still want to win. So there you go. So now projectiles, on the other hand, they're kind of simple. This guy fires it, it moves at a speed, it does a certain amount of damage. Now projectiles for us are actually kind of tricksy because we do a lot of clever stuff with them. When I hit these guys, they briefly, in many ways, they turn into projectiles. The reason I can kill this guy with his buddy is because he flew back and he, took a lot of damage and stuff. He gained an attack payload, which means there's a damage associated with, hey, if you hit anything, deliver that damage. That's just like a projectile. If I had movement things, if I had orbit, well, my shots will orbit, the guys I hit will orbit. That's all pretty complex, that's not trivial. There's a reason that you don't see a ton of combinatorial games come out. They're fun. We all like games like Binding of Isaac or Gungeon or Nuclear Throne. We're like, why don't I see more of those? They're kind of a pain in the butt to code. I'll show some of that pain in the buttness, just what that's all about. But projectiles for us are a bit complex because they have to behave like creatures when you hit them. Creatures have to behave like them. And they have a bit more state than a simple carnage point because they're doing damage, because they have these crazy movement patterns and stuff. So they're a lot more complex to pool, but we still manage to do that. If we have a bunch of creatures, these guys now are all shooting pooled projectiles. I picked up mind over bullets, so I can even knock these things back into them. That's part of what I mentioned about we have kind of complex projectile behaviors. All these now come out of a pool and get dumped back in the pool, and I'll optimize that a little bit more when we jump into the dev side of things. The other things that are now pooling, carnage points and the floating text that comes up, like if I go and turn on more verbose health, these little things, they appear and disappear all the time, those little 15s and stuff, and so rather than spawn a brand new thing in the world, now we just kind of like, hey, let's spawn a whole bunch of stuff invisibly, and then we'll bring it out, we'll tell it to be 15, let it do its little 0.7 second dance, and then send it back into the void to wait to be summoned again. So I'll talk about that pooling in part, because I'll go dig into a bit of how we're doing that, and I'll go fix some bugs with it, because when you fundamentally change, we're like a bit over a year in development, when you fundamentally change every single projectile in the world, you're going to have some drama with it. We have a lot of different projectile kinds. Let me spawn a bunch of stuff here, and they all do a lot of things. Any of these going to give me interesting stuff? Let's go find something cool that will. Hey, here we go. Bomber's fine example. So right now I fire a harpoon projectile.
That pulls things back to me. Very handy for positioning. Less handy for damage, but it's a good starting thing. It kind of reinforces the fact you throw these harpoons initially, reinforces the fact that our game, a lot of it's really about positioning and doing neat stuff. But if you want more on the damage side, now I'm throwing these bombs around because I picked up Bombardier. Now every time, I'm sorry, not Bombardier, Bomber. This means that now instead of throwing these harpoons around, now I'm actually throwing bombs around. And all the same stuff, is going to stack up with it. But you'll notice, these bombs, they're flying a little too fast now because I just changed so much of them. They're a little small. I think they could stand out more. So we're going to fix that kind of stuff. Every kind of projectile in the world now behaves a little differently. And we just changed everything about it. We changed physics. We changed all these things to make them be poolable. And so we'll go clean up a bit of that. But it's really neat. The fact that, hey, when I hit a guy, all my normal stuff, for instance, if I hit this guy in the wall, he explodes now. Why does he explode? Well, I have Bomber. That's going to do more damage to creatures, but also, I'm at risk now too. I can't dash him in a wall, but I can hit him in a wall and he explodes. But I can't run up and, if I do this, I'm going to take more damage. Bomber's changed how my creatures behave, and I wallop them. It's changed my projectiles into a brand new, no more harpoons. Now we're all throwing bombs around, and that'll all stack with everything. This is the joy of that combinatorial business. If I pick up Shock Attack, Shock Attack will now mean that if I miss with a bomb, it still has a chance of shocking things that are kind of nearby to it. I don't have to hit as directly because it may zap things. That thing was doing a ton of damage too. If I were to pick up Tracker Shots, Acid Strike, another fine example. Tracker Shot doesn't affect my any of my projectiles, but now wallop creatures, I'll leave a little trail of acid behind it, which will damage themselves, damage their buddies. It all adds up. If I have Tracker Shots, Laser Sight, this is actually a pretty good combo. Laser Sights makes my shot go straighter, and it'll do a little ticking damage. Here I can do a little trivial amount of damage to anything I'm staring at. But now, apropos to the other stuff that we're doing here, when I fire these things, when I fire bombs, I need to do a good setup. Hit the guy. Okay, so now see how he's glowing there? That is because shots will now home into him. So now my bombs will curve around, knock him around, blow him up. Life is sexy. So all these things adding up is cool. It's what makes these kinds of games so rewatchable. It's what makes every run be really different. It's also a burden on us as developers. Poor us. We really have to, hey, let's set this on fire with my laser sight. We need to think all the time about making sure that stuff synergizes well with each other, that if you expect, what if I got Bombardier and I could drop 2 bombs at once? Does that mean that Bomber bombs now double? Yeah, we do a lot of that kind of stuff because it's fun when you find these little hidden synergies in the game, or either because we designed it that way, or because just the emergent gameplay does neat stuff. So we try to get along with both of those. So, to roll all that all the way back, projectiles for us are kind of complex, but they're now pooled. This is work of 3 or 4 days or so in the last week. And so because of that, they're now much more efficient, but we're going to have to do a little debugging pass, make sure we didn't break the shiznit in our life here. And I'm going to destroy this boss because I happen to know, his bombs make me go way too fast. We'll go fix that. This boss is vulnerable to, he only takes a tiny amount of damage from the ticks, but if I can hit him with any bombs, it's a little challenge because of their speed, he's going to take double damage from those because he's vulnerable. You get over there, you get over there. I noticed another bug with these bombs. Normally, by the way, it's kind of a rule of demo. This is no bugs. This is a demo, man. I noticed another bug with the bombs, which is they're not colliding properly. This bomb is a physical object, so it ought to go and hit that guy and bounce off like it does with a wall. But it's not. When I drop this guy, I'm killing people too fast. That bomb's flying right through them. We'll go fix that as well. So fixing bombs is going to be on our little hit parade today. And I'm only going to do one more room because I have Spin Doctor, which is fun. And let's go see what spinning death when you're firing bombs at rapid speed looks like. Spoiler alert, it's going to suck for us. Also, enemies got Sharpshooter. Every level you go down, we mutate the enemies as well, so every run gets different. Like,
a run where everybody got, I shoot slightly farther every level is way different than I got a damage up and a fall stats increase for every enemy on every level. Yeah, guess which one of those runs is going to suck? Well, spoiler alert. Ooh, I have enough money for something. We'll check out, I guess, one more room before we go. Scout armor, already got some. Quick feet. Let's go really fast. Why not? Scout armor, quick feet. I'm booking along pretty decent now. I am, what? Let's see. 4.5 speed. That's pretty darn good for second level. Of course, I cheated and I gave myself a bunch of mutations. So, pure event spin doctor. Now everything in here is going to spin, which is kind of cool. But, man, did I really wipe the room out that quickly? Holy crap. I think it's because as I came in, I hit with my laser beam a popper right in the middle, and normally these guys will wander around a little bit. Poppers explode as soon as you damage them. So I think what I did is I kind of snuck in there, and like before they got to disperse it all, I was able to set them all off. So that doesn't suck. Here, one final thing here. Let's go over here. Oh, I don't have no keys, but I can at least repair. Let's dash. Oh, and I failed. Well, good thing I got that repair. I'm not going to jump across and do that. Okay, so that's enough of this. We racked up a couple of bugs to fix. We're going to go into Bomber. I'm going to show you some of how projectiles work. And then we're going to make it collide with stuff in a proper fashion so that it is going to properly bounce off of all other sorts of stuff. I'm going to set it up so that it pools, because right now I have the enemy bullets. There's little laser bullets. They're all pooling. Bombs aren't pooling yet, so we'll make them pool properly. We're going to speed them up a bit, because one of the things I need to do when things are sitting in a pool is I need to make them be as quiet as possible. And I mean that in the literal sense of they can't be playing audio. You can't have that fuse hissing away in the background of 500 bombs in a pool going like, what the heck is that? But secondly, they need to be quiet from the standpoint of taking up time. You know, if they are sitting there, ticking means something does something every frame. You rarely want to have a lot going on a tick. But even if anything infinitesimally small goes on a per tick basis, a per frame, meaning 60 frames a second plus. You know, right now we're running at 118 frames a second. But in the game, we want to make sure we're maintaining 60 frames per second. If anything's ticking, and there's 500 bombs all sitting there doing like, even checking something really basic like, am I near a character? That's going to be really slow. And I was noticing that, you know, we need to turn off the ticks, not just for our main actor, not just for the projectile, but each of its little children. Hey, it's the little smoke trail the missile's leaving behind. Oh, okay, make sure it's not doing that. Oh, the physics. Oh, make sure that's absolutely nothing's going on there. We want to make sure that as much as possible, these things in the pool are they're in suspended animation to the best of our ability. So let's go do that. So we're going to wander down into our blueprint structure. We do we try to roughly group large classes of things together. So under projectiles, you'll note that we have a boatload of projectiles under here. Oh my God, Gaffney, why you got so many projectiles? Well, it's because a lot of these are experimental. A lot of these are things that you'll see on deeper floors of the dungeon. You know, we have flamethrower projectiles in here that flamethrowers shoot. We have sling blades that you can toss around. In my test level, we have access to a ton of these things. And so let's go make sure we bring up our test level as well. My test level is just a little area which is a small subset of the full dungeon. When you're an RNG game, you're procedurally generating your content. It means that if I was like, I'd like to test a bomber. Well, do I really want to go play 10 hours before I randomly get a bomber drop? I don't think so. So my test room is set up with a couple things. Pretty letters on the wall here. This little actor I made that will spell out in neon lights whatever you want it to. So, you know, hopefully as we have people playing on the stream, like put their names into this kind of stuff. So that like signs change dynamically. Here's a fun little actor over here. This is a little wall monitor I have, and I'll show what that's all about in a little bit. And these little things here are just little test spawners. And nicely named for that. Saw Slinger, for instance, is going to make it so that we spawn a chainsaw that throws sling blades. Those are kind of fun. Let's go give ourselves Bomber, because that's the thing we're going to want to test the most. This is very simple. You know, the way we do our spawning is it's based on gameplay tags. If you're in Unreal, you'll know what those are. If not, it's a naming system site. You can basically say, the item I would like to spawn, well, we're going to give that a name so we know exactly what that refers to. And it's going to be a spawnable object. It's a leaf class, meaning it's not a pool of things like what's my pool of stuff I spawn on death. It's an object, It's a mutation. Even more specifically, I want the bomber mutation. So whatever tag we put in here, this is a very simple little spawning thing that's going to go boop, and when I run the game, it's going to spawn that puppy. So let's go run the game and spawn that puppy. Oh, here, I'm going to reset my stats because I'm bringing my old character in, so no more laser sight. Well, so now, if we want to go test bomber, here I am. I have a brand new character here with base stats. I'm throwing bomber. You see it's not colliding these rocks? That's bad. We don't want that to collide with rocks. I'm not shocked that's the case it doesn't. When it collides with rocks, it'll collide with other physics things that are in the game, like this big ball and chain. Hey Gaffer, I never saw the ball and chain in the game. Yeah, in Gaffer's test room, you'll see all sorts of stuff that's kind of like in pre-working. This physics here, it's a little jiggly for me, so I don't want it in our actual level yet. So as I tune that kind of stuff, I'll get it to a point where it's like, oh, I love it. It should go in the game. Let's have some big spinning balls to shove around and knock creatures into pits and stuff. Or it'll never actually see the light of the actual game because I'm like, that's not as cool as I thought it would be. So this is a land where many test things tend to live and die and never get seen. So let's do here. Now I've set up Saw Slinger. Saw Slinger is also throwing physical objects like bombs would be. Oh, here, but I can't, because bomber changes your base projectile type. It actually means that I'm still firing them with that weapon. So Saw Slinger, I can now throw these little things around. You'll note they're physical too. And by that I mean they fly through the air with the greatest of ease. They bounce off of occluders like you'd kind of hope bombs will, so we'll make these very similar. They fly flat, and then when they hit something, they drop to the ground. So it kind of feels like a little physics object. You know, you notice they're flying straight, and then when it hits a thing, it drops into the pit or whatevs. They also, because the same thing that lets them do this, will also let them, well, that's a bad example of shooting myself in the face. Will also let us knock objects around. Because this thing has physics on it, it's going to actually knock that around. If I'm smart, it's even going to like do things like my shots are a little low to actually hit it, but here, look, I can physically knock this stuff around. Bombs ought to do the same stuff, and sure enough, they don't. They go right through everything. So let's fix that first. That should be easy, you'd hope. Spoiler alert, that's what physics kind of pain in the butt. I don't really guarantee it's going to be that easy. So here is our blueprint for base projectile. We do things in Unreal. Unreal has this really cool scripting system called blueprints. There are some limitations to them. You know, you can't really make your whole game in blueprints if it's of any real size, but you can make a lot of your game in blueprints. And so we use it fairly heavily. Things that need to be really fast, we push down into C++, you know, the programming language that we use at a deeper level. So if you have like a billionth resolution, you can see that this is parent is a CPP projectile. I'm in C++ projectile. So I have some code written in C++. I have more code written here in base projectile and blueprint. And so in C++, we handle things that need to be really fast. You know, stuff that happens per frame, that kind of thing, tends to live in C++. Now, base projectile, that's handling things every projectile needs to know about. So it's things like what happens when I hit an enemy. How do I deliver an attack payload? That's our system of delivering damage in a portable way so that I can say, hey, Mr. Robot, I've smacked you and your buddy. You need to do, 15 points of damage. I give it an attack payload, and it delivers that attack payload. It carries along with it as it wallops back, smacks into his buddy. Here, take 15 damage from this payload. And that'd be easy if it was just saying, 15 points. Well, you'd be like, Gaffney, dude, just send a number. Send a float and say 15. Yeah, well, that'd be cool, except for the part when that dude's on fire and he's spinning in a circle and he's going to infect anyone he hits with a virus that's going to damage him, and he's leaking acid the whole trip. All that complexity a good chunk of it gets wrapped up into an attack payload and passed around. So base projectile handles stuff like that. Here we are initializing them. You initialize something, a projectile, when it's birthed. When it comes out of the pool, you say initialize. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know. Leaf ID. What's that mean? Well, that's the name it has, a unique name. Remember how we did the spawner and I'm like, here's how we spawn bomber? Well, in a similar fashion, there's a unique name for every kind of projectile. So if it's a syringe projectile, it's going to inject someone. Well, that's going to have its own unique name. Spawn.leaf.projectile.syringe. Even syringe.sticky, for ones that is going to inject you with a slow serum and stick your feet to the ground. Each of those things has a unique name. And so that's what a leaf ID is. Spawner, who's responsible for me? Who's the dude who shot me to begin with? It says initial spawner. Why do we make that distinction? It's because many things, mind over bullets we've seen once or twice. I can hit bullets out of the air and smack them into someone else. If that bullet only remembered the first person who shot it, then me smacking it would mean like, hey, that's a hostile projectile. It'll damage me. It won't damage other enemies. When I hit it, I take ownership of it, so that now it's going to damage my enemies. Because it would be pretty boring if it's just knocking bullets back. It'd be kind of cool from a defensive standpoint. It wouldn't be as cool from like, I want to kick butt and take names. Movement payloads. Same thing as attack payload, which we're about to pass in here too. Movement payloads do, hey, spin in a crazy circle, hey, float up and down, bounce off of stuff. In a similar way that we pass things involving attacking, we pass things in movement along with movement payloads. And other basic stuff. How long are you going to last? How fast are you going? How much damage are you going to do? Are you going to override certain base things so that like, hey, I want this boss to spawn giant bombs. Well, I could give it a custom scale when the boss fires it, or make it do more knockback or damage, that kind of stuff. Also, it passes along, hey, what's the audio do? So there's all the basic setup that we do, for a average projectile that does nothing else interesting. And you'll see this thing's pretty simple. There's a collision component. We make that in C++. That says, let's go take a look what those look like. Looks like next to nothing, man. This collision component is auto-generated, and what it does is basically say, what's the area that we're going to collide with stuff? What area am I going to damage in? We represent that by spheres. We do some other shapes and stuff for more complex ones, but whatevs. Near miss detector. This is something that says, hey, if you get hit by this little circle that's in front of the bullet, and then you step out and don't take damage, the crowd's going to love it. And so it's like, hey, near miss, yay! Or even a near death thing. If you were one hit from dying, you got that close, almost touching a bullet, and you stepped out of the way, we reward you. The audience loves it. Anything the audience loves, the real world audience might love, oh, you almost died. Our audience tries to reward you as well. Your movement component, remember that thing we passed in that spins around? There it is. Movement payload does that. Movement component is the thing in Unreal that we've written in C++ that is handling things like gravity and stuff. It's the movement of it. So that's a basic projectile. Super duper simple. You're like, but Gaffney, where's the part where it looks like a bomb or a laser bullet or whatever? That all happens in the child classes. And so, more interestingly, let's go find our bomb projectile. Which is over here in content. Wow, we got a ton of stuff there. Bomber. Not bomber. Gaffney, where's your brain? Projectile. Bomb projectile. So now this is a child class. For those of you who aren't big C++ fans or whatever, child class means, hey, you're just like a projectile, and you have all this other stuff. So we set a lot of things here in its construction script. These are things that, remember we do pooling now. We set a lot of stuff in construction script because this is setting up saying every bomb starts off like this. When you come out of the pool, this is what you look like, on the basic level. And bombs are a little different by default. They look like, go figure, a bomb. And you know what? While I'm in here, should I go cheat a little bit? I find these things really hard to read because they're not bright enough. Do I want to go muck with this? We won't do that. We'll stick with what we were planning on. I'm going to make this a little brighter so you can see it more. If you shoot one in dark light, this yellow doesn't pop enough. You really want to be able to see it a little better. So I might go mess with that a little bit and make that a little brighter. So here's what the thing looks like. Simple enough. It doesn't look like an invisible sphere like a base projectile. These things and all of its children look like bombs. And it has a particle effect on it. Normally this is empty, but for this case, a little fuse on the top, that's this little fuse projectile particle system playing when the thing's flying through the air. Deadly particle means if this thing is going to kill you, we mark the projectiles that might kill you with different particles or change their materials. Most of the time they glow red. That's the thing that handles that. But anyway, enough of that. So I kind of know what our issues are going to be, and that is we have a little sphere here as well. It's called Behave Like Movable Occluder. And what the heck does that mean? What that means is when you have physics, a basic projectile mostly overlaps stuff. And by that I mean if I fire it at a creature, by default what it does is it looks like it hits the creature, but really what it's doing is saying, hey, am I overlapping anyone else? Hey, little goblin over there, am I overlapping you? Hey, little robot, am I overlapping you? Every step it takes through the world in physics, it's looking for these overlaps. And then when it actually crosses something, the projectile decides what to do. Usually that is, hey, do some damage and get out of the world. But remember, we're combinatorial, and that means the projectile might be like, you know what? I'm ethereal. I pass through things and cause a bunch of damage. So it overlaps it to give it a choice about whether it destroys itself, bounces off, whatever the heck it does. So a basic bomb, that basic collision shape, almost exclusively overlaps things. Behave like movable occluder. Occluders are things in the world that block your movement. They occlude your movement. And so behave like one. This has physics that are set up so that this little creature over here, its collision shape is going to do more interesting stuff. It's going to block on a bunch of stuff. It's going to block on dynamic objects, things that tend to move around. It's going to block on when it bumps into physics objects like itself, like this, other things that swing ball and all that's a physics object. It's going to bounce into vehicles. Vehicles are things like spike balls and whatnot, things that roll around. Why is it vehicle? It's because we're using a channel. Well, don't stress it too much. It's going to do stuff like bump into carnage. It actually shouldn't, so let's change that while we're in here. These things shouldn't be knocking carnage points around. That's kind of odd. It'll bump into other projectiles or even block them. That makes sense. You don't want this to, if you had a giant bomb being fired, it'd be kind of weird if you could shoot through it. It doesn't go through the floor. It'd be a real quick bomb if it fell through the floor. It doesn't go through walls. It decides whether or not it's going to pass through another occluder. I think that should be blocked too. Let's change this. Maybe I'm starting to already see exactly why this thing is funky. It's going to block against NPCs. This is set up really weird. I don't know what I was thinking. This is what you get if you're. This is why you don't drink and do this, I guess. Well, I guess here's why that's doing that. So you have an NPC, then you have pawn. Pawn we use for flying NPCs. Why don't we call it flying NPC? Same kind of reason. You're forced to use certain channel names in Unreal. And so for the way that we do AI, it's useful to reuse the pawn channel for flying creatures. So flying PCs and flying creatures pass through occluders. If you have a barrel or a rock or something, you fly right over it. And so they fly right over these bombs. You don't collide with things that are flying. So that's why that's set that way, so that kind of makes sense. But if you're a walking person, you want these things to bump into you. Okay, so that all seems pretty reasonable. And we start this thing off, this is how it's going to be in the pool. We start this thing off so that it's not colliding with anything. Let's go force that to happen in the construction script. That's easy peasy here. Let's go take this behave like movable occluder. And I think it doesn't want to collide with anything while it's in the pool. So we're going to set collision enabled. We're going to make it be no collision. We're going to do this right here, right before we go into our deeper thing. And just because we want to, we're going to straighten this up so it's not all ugly. I will leave some scattered nodes around at times, but it's kind of like cooking, You sort of want to clean up as you go because it saves you having to think about it later. So, also this from an MMO thing. I coded MMOs for a long time. MMOs, man, making things maintainable is more important than making it fast or anything else. Having the next guy who comes in on your 300-person team actually be able to know what the heck you were doing, more important than almost anything else. Sounds silly, but my God, it's so true. So I have a bit of a habit of trying to write clean code, trying to document stuff where necessary to do that. Okay, so we don't do much here in our event graph. What we do is whenever we spawn from the pool, we're going to enable physics after a certain period of time, half a second. This lets us drop a bomb at our feet, and then when we, if we haven't moved, the bomb all of a sudden starts colliding with stuff. It'll bump into you. It can be very annoying. We give it a little grace period to basically say, hey, don't start blocking everything right away. Give you a little grace period where you can kind of overlap stuff or fit yourself into the world, and then we're going to turn on your physics and let things resolve. So what we do here is, after that time, this looks like to me like this ought to work. We're going to set collision enabled, only if you're not overlapping creatures. Because what you don't want to do, query only, we're doing this twice. We're doing this twice because we're not smart, I would say. So, let's see if that works now. So now what we're going to do is say, okay, when we are, we're going to set our collision to be enabled only after we do this. We know we're starting off when we come out of the pool with that. Let's go make sure that we're also returning our collision to a, here we go, when we're pooled, projectile enter pooled collision state. When you're going back in the pool, hey everybody, back in the pool, make sure we turn that collision off, because everything else happens automatically, but because this is a bomb has to do this thing which only it has, which is this behave like movable occluder thing. I'm going to guess that should now make stuff work. The thing that was funky was this was turned off by default, and we're turning it on in a weird way. So my hope is when I throw this now, it's going to bounce off this rock into the pit. I'm going to look brilliant. Everything's going to be happy. No bugs. We never have bugs. And I'm totally wrong. So, yeah, like I said, perfect the first time. So, what are you doing differently than a saw blade so that your physics are not colliding with this thing? Well, let's go check. Let's go take a look at our main event graph. Make sure we're not doing anything crazy here. Now that, it used to be you'd do stuff in begin play. It's a function it's called whenever you start. However, now we don't. When we hit environment, we don't do any actual action. Normally it'd be like, oh, I'm going to dissipate and stuff. We don't worry about that because we're a bomb. So I would query, why the heck am I able to fire through stuff? Well, I'm not sure exactly, but I have a little bit of a suspicion. I suspect that we're throwing those bombs so fast now, maybe it's in that half a second, it's actually made it through other stuff. So just as a little test case, if half a second goes on here, maybe it's already through the rocks by the time that happens. Let's see what happens. This is really short. When we spawn from the pool, now after a second, we're going to turn on our thing. Okay, maybe it's like this. Maybe it's because we're overlapping still a creature. Maybe we're overlapping ourselves. That could be an issue if we're spawning so fast. That's a good question here. Maybe let's try a little sort of median value. I'll shrink that down a bit, but still give it time to get clear of us and see what happens. Next thing we do, by the way, we're going to slow that puppy down anyway, so maybe that's the right thing. There's my fine. Why are you flying through that? And I know, and we're going to go look at Sling Blade and see what... Bomber wins over Sling Blade. This is bouncing like a champ. Let's go see how they're written. That's more or less the behavior we want. So let's go see what makes you you. So let's go look in our projectile folder over here. We're gonna show in folder view. We're gonna look for Sling Blade, Saw Blade, Projectile, and we're gonna see what we did here. By default, we have collision enabled on our main component. This thing collides as a projectile-based preset, so that's fine. We simulate physics. That's fine. Oh, let's make sure we have that set. We don't expend on hit environment. We always deflect whenever we're walloped. That lets you knock stuff around. This guy's not doing anything too crazy here, so let's go see what we're doing with this puppy. What are your collision settings like? You only do physics. You're starting off... Are you starting off able to collide with stuff? You are starting off able to collide with stuff, so maybe I'm just getting a little too clever here. When we enter our initialized collision state, we're not doing anything extra. That surprises me, man. We're doing a lot of setup here to make this work. So when we expend, we're making sure we stop colliding. We'll make sure we do that. When we hit the environment, we set constraint mode. This is that thing keeps it falling flat and level. We turn that off. We enable gravity so it starts falling. We make sure it's simulating physics. And we set its plane constraint off as well for the movement component. Both those things can kind of force a projectile to move flat. So when we activate our spin blades, we're not doing this business over here because that's disconnected. You'll note this is that same code we were doing for the bomb. Here we're not doing it. Maybe. Damage shape damage. This isn't doing that delay trick that we're doing over there. So. This is not necessarily obvious to me about exactly how this thing is really that different. The main thing that is different is that this collide is moving occluder is set to collide all the time. But that should be a bit of a bummer, except when it goes in the pool. That's a little funky. Well, let's do a test for something that should not work. what should not make a difference to this, because I am kind of hand setting all the stuff for it, it should not matter. Oh, look, man, this is set up to... Let's make this be physics only to start, as opposed to query only. Query means, hey, you can overlap, but you can't collide with stuff. Physics only means, hey, you can collide with stuff, but you can't overlap. You can't really trigger any events off it. Maybe it's as simple as that, but that is still going to be a little bug that we're going to go fix. So take a bomb. Still nothing. Why can't you be like your little brother here? How fast these puppies are. I promise we will slow that down too. Okay. I am bemused. Let us go look here. Let's search for every time we're messing with behave like movable occluder, because this is the thing that ought to be blocking us. So the two things we'll do, we'll look at for every time we refer to this puppet. When we enable our physics, if we're not overlapping with a creature, we set this thing to be physics only. Seems reasonable. And that's behave like movable occluder. And we check against it to make sure it's not overlapping. Now, that's a little buggy. Remember how this thing used to query only? There was a reason for that. Set collision enabled. If it can't collide with anything, because it came out of the pool, it can't query. So that is a bit of a bug. That's a bit of a bug. So if this thing has overlapping actors, length greater than or equal to 0 means that if there are, this will be true if there are none. Nothing is overlapping with it. So let's do a little print string here. If it's not 0, how long was it? That'll let us know if this thing is all the time, if it's overlapping all the time or if it's never overlapping. So that's there, returning physics on, if and only if we're not colliding with anyone. I'm not a huge fan of that, by the way. Let's picture us throwing a bomb through a guy. That should really tick and keep trying to turn on its physics, but we'll leave it be for the moment. That ain't the bug. The other time we're going to do things, when we start off here, we're turning off our collision in our construction script. That should be okay. We're going to turn it to no collision when we enter our pooled state. That should be okay. That seems pretty sexy-rexy to me. So, I guess the one thing that's different, so for a test, even though it is quote-unquote not the right thing to do, in this construction script, we are not going to turn off collision for this thing. Let's see if that... I'll do this in 2 steps. We'll be a little cautious. We're going to go over here. We're going to go make us some bombs. And then we're going to do stuff like little bomber boy. I still got a harpoon. Bomb. And make sure I didn't accidentally fix stuff. I did not accidentally fix stuff. I'm mucking around. We're going to go over here. We're going to disconnect this pin so that he starts off behaving like a movable occluder. We're also going to double check some other settings on this and make sure I didn't goof something up. But you should be fine. You should all be fine. No drama. You're starting off with your physics enabled, so is it something to do with how I'm turning that on and off? Yes, it is. It's the fact that if that is set on from the beginning, it is just fine. So let's not get clever with this. Let us go. When we are spawned from the pool, let's not do this waiting business here. Let's just go right ahead and be like, hey, we're going to set ourselves to collide. I will collide. Hey, hey. Let me find out, by the way. I'm not really a singer. So we're going to put you back. You're no collision when you start off. We're going to turn your collision on when you're spawned, exactly, for that behave like a movable occluder. Now you'll note, we never saw those print strings fire, did we? So that implies it was making that call before. Maybe it's because it was going so fast. We'll kind of see. Okay. Wow. I am shocked. Why would that not work? Why would that not work? Why ever would that not work? Well, there's a couple things. First of all, that would not work if this, so that construction script, this is no collision. It would not work if this were never getting called. That'd be a real simple way for it to work. So when the projectile spawned from its pool, it does all of its stuff of its parent, it does all the things in C++, then it comes here and it turns its business on. So that should be fine. That should be being called. Let us confirm that. Hey, bomb handle spawn from pool. Once you're setting this, let's go find out and see what exactly your physics is like. Maybe it takes a frame to turn on that collision. Maybe that frame's too long. I don't know. Let's go find out. So let's print when we're here. And what we're going to do is be like, hey, what's your collision type? I don't know. Let me print it out. So we should see, and just, I like our messages that aren't just print strings that you end up forgetting what the heck they are. So we're going to say, this is happening when we're in bomb spawned. We're going to say behave like movable occluder has a collision type of blah blah, whatever that is. That's why we're doing this little pen here. So my expectation, and I'm right every time, is going to be whenever a bomb spawns, we'll see a little print string saying its collision type is set to collide only. Fire a bomb. And the print string, as you can clearly see, is nothing. So something is not getting called for this puppy. That is highly unusual. Bomb handle spawn from pool. We're going to go check this out. We're going to go find references. This exact function is indeed being called from projectile handled from pool. Let's go look at our parent and just see. This doesn't do anything. And this is just a null function, meaning, this is built to be overridden by its children. So, oddly, it seems quite odd to me. This is a pretty basic thing. So let's do a print string here. And let's say that, this is inside a projectile handle on spawn from pool. Projectile handles on spawn from pool. Fosp. No, it's not barfing. That'll just leave me some hint. I gotta go clean up all these little debug strings. Leave me some prayer of what's happening. Firebomb projectile. You're not being called. As God is my witness. Why are you not being called? Well, let's make sure this thing's being called. Maybe nobody else is overriding this. It's Buddy sure isn't. When we're spawned from pool, we're calling projectile handle on spawn from pool. That seems pretty freaking basic to me. I don't see... You know what? I can tell you something that's a little funky about that. We don't really want to be overriding on spawn from pool. And the reason I say that is this. It's a little Byzantine. It's a little complex. When you're a projectile, you're spawned out of the pool. Yes, you do have these calls made on you. It's odd to me that these calls are not being made. We'll track that down in a bit. However, where the magic happens for our projectiles isn't really on spawning from pool. Where it really, in fact, we're just going to delete this entirely. Because I don't think we really need to do anything brilliant when we spawn for pools. Yeah, poolable. Poolable, that is a class of things which can be pooled. A handle spawn from pool. Bali, you're gone. Instead, what we're going to override is what happens on initialize. On spawn from pool means any object that comes out of a pool, hey thing, wake up, do your business. So that should be called on these. However, projectiles are complex. Remember I mentioned that? So we initialize them. After they're spawned from pool, we call initialize, and that is where you know, hey, what's my attack payload? Hey, what's going on? And so if I had a suspicion, spawn from pool is not being called properly in this thing, and that does need to be fixed. However, what we really want to do is override the event that happens when we are initialized. Event projectile on initialize. Simply enough. We're going to call its parent just to be, anal retentive about the whole thing. We shouldn't really need to. And then this is now where we're going to try all that puppy. I'll bet you this works. I'll bet you now everything is happy in bomb land. But let's find out. I'll go over here. Hey, I bounced. Hey, look, our collision says there. So, So we fixed a bug and we found we found two. We fixed one. Bug number one. The real root of this puppy is handle spawn from pool is not getting called. We are now going to go back to our little setup here where we're going to take, I'm going to put this back to 0.5. We're going to only turn on our physics after a little bit. could make this thing... Remember that looping thing I mentioned? I'm going to do that now, because that's just how we roll. What I'm going to say is this thing is only going to get called once. And what's going to happen is there's a little danger with, before I'm finished doing one thing, I'm going to try another thing, but I don't fear that at all. What we're going to say is this thing is going to you know what? I deleted my little thing here where we have that collision check. I'm messing this up. Let's go steal it from Saw Blade and do what they did. Let us go over here. Let us go check when we collide as a moving occluder. Collide as a moving occluder, doesn't collide with creatures. Yeah, but it overlaps. That's what we're going to be setting this up with. Oh. Oh. Yeah, see, I need to productize all this. Shouldn't really be copying code around. So let's do this kind of from scratch, rather than copying it. Let's try to make this be our prototype of how it's going to work in the future. So I'm not sure of the behavior. If I have block set here, but I have query only on, I believe that will actually give me blocking hits with stuff. So let's assume that for the moment. We're going to take this puppy. We're going to say get overlapping actors. We're going to only care about overlapping actors that are creature types. Luckily, we know that they all derive from CPP, base character. We're going to find out if there is even one of them. And if so, if we have a thing, we're going to do our business here, and we are going to, let me think, we're going to only do this once, and so we're just going to stop. Now, but if there is something overlapping it, you know, if valid index, oh yeah, see here I am doing this in exactly the wrong fashion. We'll do it the same way as we did before. How many actors do we have? We want to do this only if we're not colliding with anything. So if the number of overlapping actors, which is going to be the length of this puppy, if that length is 0 or less, because theoretically it could be an error of some kind, just be a little paranoid, we'll do less than equal to 0. So, and then just to save having this sort of complex thing, let's go collapse these guys down. Collapse nodes, and we'll name it something nice. Overlapping any characters. Now that has that sort of, wrapped up future people, including future me. When I come by, I'm like, what the hell does this thing do? Well, now no, that's what happens. If we're overlapping any characters, we're going to turn overlapping any characters. This is overlapping no characters. Man, mind is a terrible thing. Like watching yourself, watching your mental balance degrade in real time, man, it's a hell of an experience. Overlapping nobody. No one. If we're overlapping no one, we'll turn on collision. Otherwise, what we're going to do here is we're going to delay a little bit, and then we're going to go back. We're basically going to what we'll do is we'll make it loop, and then because we're saving it here in this timer. Now we're going to go grab that timer. That is our enable physics timer. If and only if we have set our collision be enabled, we're going to break this. So clear and invalidate timer by handle. That should kill that timer off. Now, so what this is saying is we're going to set a timer by the event. This thing is going to loop. I'm pretty sure that will mean our physics will be, I'm pretty sure that timer stays relevant through that whole thing. We'll test that a little bit just to make sure. If we're not over, so we go in after, and what we're going to do is we're going to pulse every half a second. We're going to check to see if we're overlapping anyone. If so, then we are going to behave like a movable occluder. If not, we're going to clear that puppy out. Now, theoretically, you may note that, okay, so we're not going to be doing this anymore because this was just forcing it to be on all the time, which we don't want no more. Bomb handle spawn from pool doesn't exist. So me cleaning up. Like I said, I'm cleaning up rather than going off and segmenting too much. If we wanted to get a little cute, and I do, because that's how I roll, we're going to take this puppy. I'm going to move it up here. It only needs to happen once, you know. I mean, it just got to turn on its collision once. It doesn't really need to do that every half a second. Now, is that call more or less free? Yeah, probably. But why not? Why not be efficient? So now this thing every half a second, we just check to see. Are we overlapping nobody? Kind of hate that term. Yeah, whatever. Just for clarity, I might well make that overlap. Am I overlapping someone, then do a knot on it and be a little clearer? But whatevs. We're going to set that timer every half second. We're going to say, hey, are we doing this? If this does not work, if this doesn't actually loop, we'll do a little print string here to know how often it goes off. And then you'll see how I kind of cheat to try to make it, make sure we actually do that. Every time it's going to do this check, it'll say hello, so we'll know if it's going to spam a bunch of times or not. And we're going to grab Bomber. Fine. It went through everything. Hardy har, what'd I break? What did I break? Well, we'll go look. Let's go see. Let's take a line of dudes. See, it's hitting those dudes, even though it's overlapping. Hello's getting called only once. Let's go make a boatload more dudes here. This is my old test punching dummy. What I'm doing here is I'm making this bomb overlap as many dudes as possible for as long as possible. And you could see, these guys are reacting to it. It is physically interacting with them in some fashion. Here, reload. That is not expected. Something funny is going on here. I'm also not seeing that hello called hello once and only once. But it is colliding with stuff, so that's all very odd to me. It's all very odd. We're going to make it complete. This is why I have a high frame rate. It's so you can mess with stuff like that. We're going to go fire from there. See, what I would expect is this should be taking longer than half a second to get through all these dudes, and so I'd be seeing multiple hellos from a single bomb, and I'm not doing that. Deep in the mystery, what did I mess up? What did I mess up? Well, we could be back to, let's make sure this works. We're going to be real simple here. I'll show you why this might end up being an issue, by the way. I'm going to make it real darn simple. All we're going to do is have that puppet do its thing. We're going to take this dropper over here, and we're going to make this dropper spawn. Boom. What do we call that? Consumable. I think it's just bomb consumable, actually. Bomb. Consumable bomb. That's going to give us a regular source of bombs, because we're going to need to test real bombs. So I expect this to bounce. It does bounce. So it's not liking doing it on the timer. Now, why am I making this little dropper here drop bombs every few? Why aren't you dropping more? You should be dropping more bombs. And we'll go take a look at that here in a minute. Bang. These bombs are also bomb projectiles. And so, why aren't you going away? You're not going away because you're not a spawned actor, so it doesn't know when you're picked up. We're not going to fix that yet, because these things aren't really intended to do that. I'm kind of abusing them here. We're just going to give ourselves a series of bombs out of these things. I'm probably talking effectively ancient Sanskrit. Why do these arrows? Oh, that's the arrow. That's where things are dropping from. Okay, so we now have 4 bombs to play with. Here's what I'm looking at. Not to segue off too much in the weeds. When I make a bomb, I picked up 4 bombs. When I drop one, it's just a bomb projectile. And that's part of how you end up with things being very clever in terms of making things overlap. Rather than having, here's one kind of bomb you drop, another kind of bomb you throw, I cheat. I make them both the same, and that way you get free synergies out of it. If I have tracking shots, well, the bombs I drop are tracking shots too. If I pick up missile bombs, well, now I fire missiles instead of bombs, and so they act like missile projectiles would. It allows us to have a lot more synergy. Here's the potential issue, and that is that this thing needs to be placed very carefully so it's not colliding with me immediately and like interpenetrating and stuff, and I can still nudge it. It looks like that works, but let's pretend that I was in a world where I was, I don't know, scaled up massively. This is what you got to think about this kind of stuff when you're aiming to be all synergistical and stuff, and also just to maintain so you don't break all the other stuff. When I go in here and let us go make Boombadeer. Boombadeer is going to make me spawn 2 bombs instead of 1. Mutation Boombadeer. What's something else that affects bombs? Let's make, what if my size were radically different? Let us go make here a gadget that grows me. That makes a bunch of big shot gadgets. Let's make a couple of those. So I can be huge. I can be as big as a room. I don't really cap your height right now. Someday I will, but for now, if you pick up multiple big shots, you're going to be really big. Okay, so here's my expectation. I would expect when I can drop Bombardier, 2 bombs will appear. They might end up being weird because they interpenetrate. So see if they're weird. That actually worked out pretty well, truth be told. I'm not adverse to that. Now, let's grow really big. Let's drop a bomb. See how one got thrown out? That's because it was colliding me when it started and kind of got tucked out. That's funky. What if I was huge? Now, yeah, I'm colliding with them a little bit. That's not too bad of a behavior. I'd like it to be a little cleaner when you have 2 bombs and you're large, but I got to admit, as far as government work goes, let's drop bombs, see if anything I changed breaks those bombs. Well, those all seem like they work pretty well. Let's pick up a bomber, let's fire stuff. See how those bombs are kind of invisible? Like they're not, yes, you can see the ribbon traveling with them, but they're just not quite visible enough. We'll pop up their base size a little bit too, for instance. Okay, so what's the net out of all that? I would say our net is, we don't need no hello. Hello. I'm going to leave this be. I'm not going to do what I used to do with this stuff and turn on physics after a brief delay. I'm just going to toss it on when it's initialized. It seems like that works well enough for the moment. And it's simple, and we like simple. Now, one of the things, remember when I drop a bomb from my bomber? Those are bigger than the ones that come out of bomber. Let's go find out why that's the case. That is an excellent question. I assume something is set custom, but because we're going to go mess with the bomb size and make the default bomb a little bigger, this feels a little tiny when they're tossing around. Let's go see what bomb gadget does. My base bomb gadget, we probably won't call it this in the real world. I don't know what we'll call it. But this is our internal term for the thing that takes those little boxes of boom, those little power up things, and it turns it into an explosive device. We only have 2 at the moment. We'll have more later. Your default one drops old school anarchist bomb, that little round thing. Or you can get a missile bombs, which lets you fire missile bombs instead. But we can change sort of the base type of your bombs through this bomb gadget. And this is your little widget you have that controls it. This is a little item you hold that controls it. So what we're doing here is we spawn a bomb, and we spawn a projectile just like you'd expect, whatever our kind of projectile is. So gadget apply activation effects. We go find our where. We have them spawn a projectile. What that projectile type is in this projectile spawn. That's going to be default to a leaf projectile bomb. It's going to be of such and thus a velocity for however fast it ought to fire. And its scale is set to 1.5. So it has a custom scale factor that makes it 50% bigger. So what we're going to do is we're going to take every bomb projectile and we're going to go into its construction script and we're going to make its default scale its default scale multiplier. Well, that's the cleanest way to do this. I'm going to say what I want to do is make sure that this interacts properly, where if I say be 1.5 times bigger, that it actually, it does actually end up being 1.5 times bigger. Let's pretend I set its scale to be 2, by default. Hey, all bombs, I want them twice as big as they are now. If I coded that poorly, then when you said, I'd like a bomb that's 1.5 times as big, it'd be like, throw out the 2. Its custom size is now 1.5 times the size. I don't know if that makes sense. Trust me, it makes sense to me, though. We're going to say our default scale, I think that's the right way to do this, is going to be... Now let's do this in a different way. Let's go over here. Let's take our instance projectile visual. It should be a safe thing to do to go take this and arbitrarily scale it up to be, I kind of like how big those normal bombs are, 1.5 times as big. And I don't trust this data to always stick around for various Unreal related reasons, so what we'll actually do is inside our construction script, we'll set the scale we're going to set the relative scale to be 1.5 times as big as its parent. This is going to do exactly what the thing is we just did in data. In fact, we'll go take out the data just to make that not be the case. We're going to go in here. We're going to do that. We're going to take this. We'll even reset it just so it doesn't confuse us later. So it starts off scale 1. Inside of construction script, it scales up to be 50% bigger. My expectation now, my real expectation is that something will be goofy, because something's always goofy. However, confident, powerful Gaffney says, of course, my normal projectile shouldn't have changed. My bomb projectiles should be as big as they were when I was dropping bombs. That didn't look right. That still looked small to me, so I don't think that's doing its business. And now when I drop these bombs, it is about right. They are the same size now, but I would have expected that that projectile to be 1.5 times as big. So let's go find out why that's not the case. There's so much stuff. Debugging is so much fun. Actually, I don't mind it, truth be told. It can be very zen-like to get about it. Let us go. Let's do something ridiculous here. Let's make this 12 times bigger. That should be pretty obvious. I expect this to be overridden by this call in the construction script. My expectation is that bombs change. Wow, look at that business. Something weird is going on. So it is changing its physics in some fashion. Did I set the wrong thing? Instance projectile. Does instance projectile collide with stuff? I would not expect that at all. Let's go find out. Collision. No collision. Dude. 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 Or do that, I guess. It's the only time I refer to it. Nothing should be changing it. That is the strangest thing. So let's not try to reset it here. I mean, here at the heart of it is what's happening. We're changing just an instance of it. That's probably what we really want to do. Not the full thing. Let me save this. Look at that action, man. That is just funny pants. Why? Why have you wronged me? Did I set that scale thing and the scale thing's messing with it? What the heck? What? Well, here's the good news. That's physically impossible. So we've invented a brand new kind of physics. The Unreal could not be made to do that of its own accord. So, obviously, if you're going to have a bug, it might as well change the laws of physics while you're at it. What did I mess up? I have to have messed up something. Was I in the wrong dang thing? That would be amusing. Let's go look at base projectile. Make sure I was not accidentally messing with base projectile. No, I wasn't. You have a trivial little construction script. Because you're happy. You are the defaults. You don't need to change any of your defaults. So what the heck is going on here? So instance projectile visual, we made it 11 times bigger. What happened is it got translated 11 times out. The visual was no bigger, but for some weird reason, man, that had physics. I would not expect that to have physics. Why? Because its custom collision presets here are set to be no collision. Don't collide with nothing. And I'm not changing that anywhere. I'm not changing it in its child class. What am I doing? So, instance projectile visual. No collision. Happy. I would now expect this to be back to tiny bombs. There must be something. Okay, good. You're still screwed up. In a way, that's good. The reason that's good is because I must have messed up something while I was screwing around with stuff. Like, must have changed this thing's collision shape instead. Your default collision component, I set to be 11 times bigger, I guess. No, see, you're all happy. Dude. This is a strange... Oh, I did behave like movable occluder. Those of you watching may have been like, Gaffney, what the hell are you doing that whole time? Yeah. Lack of sleep is a hell of a drug, man. Okay, we're not going to make this 15 times the size. We're going to make this 1.5 times the size. We're doing that on an individual instance. I'm going to go back here, actually do it like we said we're going to do it. Do it like they do it on the Discovery Channel. By doing that in a construction script instead. We're going to do an instance projectile visual. Doesn't it feel like we just did this? Only an insane person would expect a different result from doing it the same way. Set relative scale 3D. Why relative? If for something else, suppose that we get some other thing that scales up all the projectiles by 2. So the parent scales up by 2. Well, we want to make sure this thing doesn't just get set to a global scale of 1.5. We want it to be, hey, 1.5 times whatever its parent was. Just thinking ahead. So we're going to make you 5 times bigger. I would now expect this, there's no collision on this, I'd expect this to be a really big bomb that interpenetrates the floor. I don't know why that would not work, but I also didn't know why the last thing didn't work until I looked at it and realized I clicked the wrong button. So let's go find out if I've clicked the wrong button. Wow. You look weirdly mutated. Look at that, it's a little football. How cute. Oh my goodness. They're changing the laws of space and time. What I goof up. Base projectile. Let's make sure we're going to bombs. Let's clear out some of these other things just to make sure I don't accidentally do a thing. In our bomb projectile, we're setting our relative scale to be 5. Maybe relative scale is not behaving the way I expect. This thing over here is 1, which is good. That's what we want. This thing over here is 1 is good. This thing is not. Somebody clicked the wrong button. So that's why it's a little warpy. What we might have to do, it is possible that with an instance projectile, my expectation is if I change this thing's base transform, is it just me or are you now huge? What have I done? Oh my god, it's breaking into life. Behave like movable occluder. That's not the one we want to mess with. Instance projectile visual, it is. If I were to change this scale, I'd expect this to go weird. And it does. Yay. If I were to change the base of this thing to go weird, you know what? Look, it doesn't actually seem to affect it. So that's what we're doing. We're changing the transform of this base thing. The instant static meshes are weird, like they're ways to copy things on the graphics card around. So what needs to happen is this, where we're changing the instance, we're not changing the global thing. We're going to go take our useless call out of the construction script because that ain't changing nothing. We would need to find the instance and change it. I think it's a very reasonable thing to do. Just go here. And then, as they would say in Jaws, I think we're going to need a bigger bomb, and I think we're actually going to have one. That is a slightly bigger bomb. That's what we wanted. Now it's a little more visual. It's a little more visible now because of that. So, I think this thing wasn't. These things I think could stand to pop a bit more, and so I'm going to make a little temporary change to this just to do so as well. We now have bigger bombs. They now collide with stuff. All that works perfectly. It behaves properly with pooling. Everything I wanted to do, I've done. Not everything. I also wanted to end up in a hot tub full of supermodels, and I'd like to ship the game. But barring those two things, I'd say I'm doing pretty good here, despite having staggered my way through setting wrong variables a couple of times. So let us go here. Let's find our basic bomb. Let's go take a look at our instance vector visual. Let's go here into MIGA bomb. Let's go take a look at what we have to play with in this. What this does, I would like to temper up the emissive on this a little bit. That'll make that glow a little brighter. But rather than being a jerk and going and changing stuff out from our esteemed art director, whom we love, instead what we're going to do is go over here. You'll notice that this thing glows kind of already. This is a pick-upable version of this thing, has this little glow to it. And so one might ask, if I made this have this little glow to it, would that give us kind of what we need right now without it being too crazy? That's a reasonable thing. I have a couple ways of tackling this. I think what I'll do, rather than messing with this thing's base material, let's do this. Let's take this. In our construction script, we're going to set scalar parameter. We are going to change, I believe the name of this is emissive, but we're going to double check it just in case over here on MI bomb. We're going to change the emissive EMMISSIVE because that's misspelled. I used to be an English major. Don't tell anybody I was an English CSW major, so typos kind of kill me, but you end up like a million typos because many people don't care because they're not pedantic English major types. Us pedantic English majors kind of want to fix all the typos, but you got to weigh that. On a three-man team, you kind of got to weigh between doing that. Is that bomb a little brighter? tough to tell. Let's go make it ridiculous. Because there's a lot of reasons why this might not work just by messing with it. Including, it's possible that doing this in the construction script might be the wrong place to do it. It's possible that pin is not hooked up in the material. There's lots of stuff. Let's make it be the brightest bomb in the history of bombs. With 100 emissive. This should glow like the sun if that's working at all. Hey, it does glow like the sun. It is working. I've now made bombs very visible. Aren't I awesome? So let's go set a more middle kind of value on that. Let's set it to be 1, fully emissive. What's emissive? That's a great question. Thank you for asking. Emissive is how bright things are. It ignores lighting when you make things emissive. So they tend not to look good. See how like this is there's no shadows or anything on this at all. I'll slow it down. There's no shadows. It looks a little unrealistic. You know, there's a little bit of shading to it, but like there's no lighting affecting it. So things that are emissive look kind of unnatural, but sometimes you just want to sort of like pop it up, make it be a little brighter, and it's not a bad way of doing that. And brighter in any lighting, you know, it's glowing. It's glowing. It one emissiveness. It is unlit. It is not glowing any, you know, it's not lit. It's not shadowed by anything. It's also not bright or anything. If you make it 100 like I did, it's like bright neon. It is emitting light. If you make it 1, it's like it looks strangely unlit. I don't want to make it 1 because I know that's kind of ugly. I am not an artist. I can do English majory stuff. I can design. I can program. I cannot art. Thanks, Unreal. I really wanted to take a 10-second pause to save. I kind of save pedantically all the time anyway. So let's do, I did 0.3. Let's do something in the middle there. Let's binary search for it. We'll do 0.7. And let's see if, my hope here is that we'll have a nicely popping bomb. Still a little too bright, but better. We'll pop that down to 0.5. And then I think we can spike the ball with a pretty successful version of this thing that is now a tad more visible, shouldn't be heinously ugly, it still receives light, you know, without being the brightest bomb in the room. Man, I think I could even have that down a little more, but maybe not. Let me not. I think that's probably about right for the moment. I would kind of like it to make that yellow on the sides pop more, but I'm not an artist, and I'd have to have Chris do that. I would say net, that was all pretty sexy. I'm pretty cool with that. Now, the other thing I'd like to do is slow this puppy down a bit, and I have 2 choices of how to do that. Choice number 1 would be I can go here in my, I don't really want to do a construction. Theoretically, nothing should ever change its value. Things you set in construction, when you're pooling, this thing's going to get spawned again and again and again. If anyone else were going to take a bomb and be like, I'm going to set its emissive value to be like 1 billion because I want a bomb glowing like the sun. For this particular, you know, this one bomb, I'm going to make it glow. Well, if it gets pooled, unless I reset that back to its base value, it's going to spawn again, even though you didn't want this new bomb glowing like the surface of the sun. It's going to glow like the surface of the sun. Scaling and stuff like that, part of the reason I save a lot of values with all this default business, what that's doing is saying, hey, when you get reset, set yourself back to the defaults. Most of this stuff is doing that, saying like, hey, no matter what kind of bomb you are, reset yourself to this state. It's a lot of the trickiness of pooling is making sure you do it. You didn't forget a particle. Not all of this particle sitting there firing away, you know, costing you time and whatnot too. Speaking of which, we're going to make sure our ticking is not happening on this. None of this should need to tick. Ticking, meaning that, hey, it's going to run, see, we don't have a tick function here. We shouldn't need to tick. Particle, I don't know, that might turn off if it's not ticking, but we'll try it not ticking. You don't tick. You don't tick. Nobody ticks. Turn off all the ticking. Sometimes Unreal doesn't document this, I find, tolerably well. Every one of these components can tick. Every single tick takes time. Even if you're doing nothing, it'll take time. And so bombs might behave really funny when I turn off the tick. They didn't in this case. My particle's still particling, my collision's still colliding. They don't give you a really easy way to just like be like, do not tick, damn it, don't do nothing. And that can be expensive. I have 500 of these sitting in a pool and you got 500 objects every frame going, I want to do, well, I guess nothing. Takes a long frickin' time to do nothing, you know? So turning off all those ticks and having them automatically turn off, only turn on when they need, a little bit tricky when you're ticky. Hey, and we're like an hour in. I'm allowed to be, you know, a little cornball about it. So, at the end of a long day too, man. I was up early, up at the break of dawn. Okay, so we're turning off that. We're turning off that. We don't need that no more. We have slightly more glowing bombs. They're going a little too fast. So as I mentioned, there's something else here I could do. When we initialize, because we know it's going to get reset every time. So even if someone else changed it, it'll go back to square one. What we want to do here is take our collision component, and we're going to try this the first way, and then we'll try it another way. We're going to set linear dampening on this thing. What's linear dampening? This means, hey, as you're traveling through the world, how much air resistance applies, And I could set this directly on this. I could go over here and be like, hey, let's go find our dampening, our air resistance. It's already set to a value. It's already 1, which means it shouldn't be traveling that fast. So I must have already been mucking with this a little bit. Instead of that, let's set it to be like 3. That should be a really pretty good amount of dampening happening. In fact, let's also set our angular dampening. This is how much do you roll? Like, when do you stop rolling? 0 means like never stop rolling. I don't want you rolling forever. Bombs ought to feel kind of weighty. And so giving this some linear dampening and giving this some rolling friction ought to... see, you're still getting fired a little too fast. You can see how that slows down now and see how it's not rolling forever. So I would say that's kind of getting there. But let's go back and instead, let's make this a little bit more moderate. Instead, we're going to muck with one of those defaults. I didn't really muck with any of the defaults. These defaults are saying every time you come out of the pool, here's what your defaults are going to be. You're going to be reset to these values. And one thing we have not yet set here is our default speed multiplier. Hey, by default, how much should I dampen my speed or increase my speed by? And so bomb projectiles, they're going to go half as slow as a normal projectile. Now, I'm hard setting some stuff here that future Jeremy is going to come back and clean up later. It's subtle. We have a game that you go down 9 levels and stuff changes all over the place. Hey, this level, all the creatures start shooting faster. You might pick up 15 different things that increase your projectile speed. So I'm kind of making things work right now with level 1 stats. But I also need to make it work well if you got 2 stat ups. It still has to feel faster, but not ridiculously fast. And then what if you got like 10 things and you're capped? You're at the max for what you could ever possibly have for how fast you shoot shots. Well, that has to feel good too. And so now if you're a designer, over time, free pro tip, you can usually get away if you balance it what its starting stat is. Then you do 2 other things. You make sure it feels really good when you get 1 stat up, like 1 average size stat up. You want to make sure your early stat ups, especially but really every stat up, feels good. You feel like you gained something. What's lamer than being like, I got +1 shot speed, and then you don't even notice how fast your shots went. You have to make it noticeable. So you want to test a lot what things are at base level. You want to test a lot what things are at level 1. Then you want to go test at level 10, at the cap. Because if you get those 3 values right, pretty much all the other values in between tend to work themselves out. Yeah, you might end up with some weird curve where like level 6 stat ups feels weird, but 10 feels great. Most of the time though, it's not that way. Like, those are the important ones. Your first stat up feels great. Your 10th stat up, whatever your max stat up, doesn't feel insane where like you're shooting things through space and time and landing bombs in the next dungeon over. And very rarely we have things that stat you down, and so you want to check your bottom cap too. It's not, your starting stat is not as low as it can go. Hey, what if we have that creature whose starting character throws things really slowly, and he starts off like a -3 for his, we call it far stat, how far you're throwing things. Well, that's got to feel good too. So you do need to balance in that. Now, it's a rare case. You could balance that later in the game, but if you balance those 4 points, the curves in the middle are going to, in general, work out just fine. And right now, I'm only setting stuff at level 1. I'm not going to try to balance everything at every level now. But you know what? Damn well gonna before we get into early access or we get into public testing, because I'd be pretty embarrassed if someone who was not me got in the game and they're far and they get a couple stat ups and their bombs are freaking unusably far. I would find that embarrassing. So anyway, so now we're going to check. We're going to start a thing. I expect this to go a fair way. that feels about right. I'd say that's not... That's probably a little... I think that's a little... going a little too far. So we're going to arbitrarily pop this down to 0.3. Sometimes you're dealing in physics, stuff is squared, so it turns out you like move it down 0.3 and really it's like, 1/9 or whatever, as much as you thought it was. But I'm not seeing that much effect from that value. I'm going to up the linear dampening a small amount, and then probably that's going to feel about right. Linear dampening, we're going to set bomb projectile. Did I only set that? I mean, I can. I happen to know nothing else really mucks with linear dampening, so I can set it in here. Properly, it would be smart to do that. If bombs are never going to change, doing it also in here is good, in case we lose that data for some reason. But it would also be smart to do it on initialize, because then it will always reset to the right value, I'd say that's probably about the way I'd like it to be. I say that. I'm not truly happy. Let's make sure this is working properly, because I would have expected a bit more change. This should fire things super far. Super freaky. Yeah, that would be 10 times the speed. Whee! Woo! Okay, good. So that does work. Base projectile, bomb projectile. Over here. So this does work, but apparently at the very low values of this, you can't see much difference. So we're going to slam this all the way down to 1/10 of the speed of a normal projectile. That seems much lower than I would have expected, especially combined with linear dampening. But there you go. See, even that, man, look at that. That's still, I don't really notice the difference between that and 0.3 or 0.1. Let's see, maybe because it is less than 1, maybe its math is interacting funkily? I wouldn't expect so. 1 is significant. Yeah, okay, 1 is significantly farther. I don't know, man. This should be just linear, This should really just change your initial speed by a pretty large amount. 0.05, 1/20th. A minuscule amount. 0.05. It'll probably help if I zoomed up a bit so you can see stuff on Twitch and ass. Yeah, there we go. We're going to go pop over here. Okay, that's about that's good. That's as slow as I wanted. I could even see it being a little slower. Now what we'll do, just for also testing goodness, we're going to go take Saw Slinger, and we're going to make this instead be Bubble Wand. What's Bubble Wand do? Bubble Wand is, it's kind of a machine gun placeholder. I think it's called Spitball Shooter in the tag name for whatever reason. Yeah, Spitball Sword. This is our sort of basic gun type thing. It's going to take your base projectile type, bombs in this case, and it's going to fire a ton of them pretty quickly. That's pretty cool. Now, one thing I note, this thing has this lower damage than my normal projectiles, but those bombs are not actually scaling with their damage. They may well have that turned off. Also, I will note that, notice how these bombs are interpenetrating a fair amount? He said penetrate. All right, let's do it in slow motion. Notice how these bombs are able to interpenetrate a fair amount. That is because when I'm messing with that thing, I'm scaling up its visual, but now it's collision. So I'm having a little bit of buyer's remorse on that front. I think what we're going to do here is we're going to set default scale max. MX means multiplier. We're going to, by default, we're going to be at 1.5 times our normal size. We're going to take our, because that'll scale both our collision and this action here. We'll scale you down. That's what I get for not having fully thought that through. You got a lot to juggle in your head when you're doing this stuff. Projectiles are so complex. Okay, so now they aren't interpenetrating, so that's good. Oh, yeah, it's distortion making that. So they're going to fire a bunch over here. They're colliding about as you would expect. We'll do that in slow motion. I'll be invulnerable just because. Those are bouncing around about as I'd expect. That's all pretty good. I'd like to give it a little bit of angular momentum when I fire it. You see it's kind of going out flat and then start spinning only when it's, well, I'm shooting into distortion. It only starts rolling, does it? It'd be nice to give it a little kick, but you know what? It's surprisingly hard in this physics system to do stuff like a little kick. Like, you add a little angular impulse and you do it at a certain location. Half the time, man, I got to fuss with that for a long while before I get what I want out of it. So we're not going to muck with that now. So by default, this did end up bigger. Let's make sure that scales well. By that I mean, let's take our bomb gadget, before we do this, let's make our bomb gadget have a custom scale factor itself. Let's say our custom scale factor is, okay, let's make sure it works. Let's do a 5 custom scale factor. This would be noticeably large. Then what we're going to go do is muck with, so we're going to go over here. We're going to start with a couple of bombs. We're going to drop a giant bomb. It's a giant bomb, oh my god. See, pretty cool. See, that just shows you, like, emergent stuff, man. Like, someday we're going to have things where you're dropping these mighty things, and then you're going to, like, knock them around with your physics. You're going to knock them into monsters. You're going to knock them into these big swinging things. Like, it's going to be freaking awesome. And it's all going to happen for free because we coded stuff like that. So my normal bombs are normal size. My bomb gadget bombs are 5 times bigger. So what if I go change this? By default, these things are also 5 times. This should make a super giant bomb. It should be 25 times is how I'd hope. I would hope these 2 things would multiply. I'm a little scared that they don't. I haven't tested this before. I did implement it that way. So my expectation now is that with Bomber, I'm shooting giant bombs. But now when I drop a bomb, I'm hoping it's even 5 times bigger than that. It's super giant. And it's not. They are the same size. So those things override. That is not how Johnny wants that to work. What I want to be able to do is set my default scale for the bomb. I want to have a custom thing come in and multiply itself to that, not replace it. I mean, best of all, I'd like 2 modes, one where you could do each. But by default, I kind of want that thing to be scaled up by a certain amount on its own. We're going to have to duck into C++ to do that. It's a long stream, but you know what? I got to do this anyway, so I might as well just do it while I'm in here, huh? I believe that I don't have C++ running, and I also believe that I was noticing, I think I need to refresh my project files real quick, so we'll get that up and running here. How are we doing otherwise? Let's make sure we got over here. Make sure we don't got no questions we want to respond to. We're shaking electrical skateboard. We're shaking through Zilla. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. So here we are. We're going to go bop into Electric Avenue. Then next we're going to take it higher. Let us go swing into here. C++ classes into Gone Viral. Here's all the mighty stuff we've done here. Let's go hunt down our base projectile, the C++ version of it. Let's go take a little peek into how exactly did we implement setting the scale on these puppies. Because when you initialize, we're calling a set scale function. And what I think I'm going to want to do is basically take it so that in that initialize thing, we're going to multiply our scale, our custom scale that's coming in with whatever our default scale was. I believe that is what we're going to want to do. Yeah, that's a little tricky. Well, we'll go mess with it. We'll make it work. We're using Perforce for our version control. We're using Visual Studio as our C++ editor. I highly recommend, even on a small project, it is quite wise to use version control. In this case, certainly if you have multiple people, CPP projectiles opened by a likely external by an external application. I don't see no external applications, so I'm going to say I'm going to call BS on that. Projectile CPP 1. Why are you being fussy? That doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. You might think, well, hey, it's because this thing has it open. No, this thing don't have it open. I already know that. Let's go reopen you, see what happens. I don't know why this is being a pain in the butt. Anyway, let's go see how we implemented set scale. In fact, set scale. And what we did with this, here we are calling set scale. This is when we're initializing. Here's our implementation of it. That's where we've defined it. Let's go look for where this is actually defined. It's possible we just did nothing. We did it all. Yep, there we go. We did it all up here in Blueprint. Look, I don't have to fix why it's being weird about my things. Let's go fix it up here. Go to base projectile. I have a sense of what this is. I think to keep things simple initially, here's our implementation of set scale. We can do in Unreal, depending how coding friendly you really are and sort of want to be with this, what you can do is implement something in C++, override it in Blueprint. You can implement it in C++, not be able to override it, but instead just have it be callable from Blueprint. You can completely hide it from Blueprint. They do a pretty good job, I think, of having these things interact. In this case, I defined in C++, I implemented setting scale here, and you can see what we do. When we call set scale, which we're doing in initialize time, we take our new scale, we save what that is, we see if we're going to override our defaults, and if so, we just set it. Otherwise, we multiply it by what we already had. And so I think what this means is that when we are doing our initialize, it's a little Byzantine, it's a little bit funky, so forgive me for working through it. I think this means when we do our initialize, let's go see if we call this overriding the defaults or not. Because what we want to do is not override our defaults. We want to add it to what was already there. So let's go take a look at projectile initialize. Projectile initialize. When we call in here, we're calling set scale from the version of initialize. We're probably not calling it here. Instead, what we're doing, we're calling it from the C++ version. So we're going to go pop back out in here. I'd like to know why you are being fussy about is this. You're opening up the right one. We're going to go into our implementation of initialize. We're going to set scale. We're saying take the new scale that's been passed in. We're return whether or not that succeeded, and we do not want to override our defaults. When we go back up in here, we go into our implementation of set scale. Let's go reduce our complexity here. Set scale with clamp. Oh, is this what it is? Am I calling a funky subfunction? That's far from impossible. Under set scale. Yeah, you know what? That's what's doing it. Okay, so we are saying false. Do not override our defaults. So we should be taking 1.5 or 5, 1.5, let's say, our default that we're coming in with. We should be multiplying it by 5. So we should be getting a thing that is, the combination of 7.5 of the scale. Then, but then we're clamping it so it doesn't get too ridiculously huge. So this all worked. I was brilliant. I coded it all right the first time, but I clamp things so that you cannot have a bomb that's as big as the whole room. And so that clamp is what we're fighting against. So let's do this with a little smaller numbers. So we're going to say our default scale is going to be itty bitty tiny. Let's see what a little itty bitty tiny bomb looks like. I would expect all of my bombs here to be itty bitty tiny. Itty bitty tiny bomb. No, and it's clamped at the minimum too. That's why it's not microscopic. Now, what I'm going to do, so let's go set that. So let's make this be a bit more reasonable. So we want half-sized bombs by default. And then when we have our bomb gadget is going to make giant-sized bombs by default. My expectation is that these add up, so that instead of being as big as it was before, it is some amount smaller. These should still be tiny. Yes, they are. Our bomb gadget. That's still a pretty big bomb, so let's go see if that is a clampy thing. Let's go make that. I think that is slightly smaller. Let's go make this be super ginormous. Because that's clamped, I'm going to guess that to my rough eye looks like it's clamped about 4x this size. So these are still itty bitty. I'm going to do a little save here, so I just start with these things. So I've done a little cheat save. There's our firing. There's our giant bomb. So as we expected, we can now adjust those things independently. We're going to do one more test here, which is that we're going to make this be super itty bitty tiny. It's primary clamped. Our expected result, and as you know, I always get the expected result. We're going to make this super microscopic. 0.01. My hope is that when we spawn a normal bomb, it's going to be clamped to as small as a bomb can be. about that size. Now, when we go and we drop a bomb, it's also itty bitty. That means things are working great. Things are working as intended. It was a little confusing there, because everything's confusing in life. It's a little confusing. We're going to make bombs by default be a regular size. We're going to make our bomb gadget fire, for now, regular size bombs. We can make them be a little bigger than normal. I think they might look good a little bigger than normal. So let's make them feel a little different. We'll make them like 50% bigger. We can independently scale bombs depending on where they're created, and yet we can also set every bomb in the game to be bigger. So that is a nice sort of mid-level bomb size. That's too big because it's as big as my head. I'll just make you be one. You get to just be a regular old bomb size. Because we're cool that way, we'll make this be a local variable for bomb, L bomb, gadget, custom, scale, so we're not plugging sort of weird random values in there. But it's 1 anyway, so we wouldn't even need one. And lo and behold, we should now have reasonable sized bombs. Reasonable sized bombs. I would say that's pretty darn good. And you know why that bomb is bigger than I thought it was going to be? It's because we're multiplying. It's because the regular bomb is 1.5 times its normal size. We're multiplying that again by 1.5, so you're ending up with, whatever the heck that adds up to, 2 point whatever, 2.25 times the size. So it is dramatically larger because those things multiply. So that is kind of like as one would expect, I guess. So I would say, I'm making a note here. Huge success. Let's make sure rain of bombs. This is our active item. It's dropping super large bombs, so it also has a custom size. So let's go fix that puppy up too. Also, you notice those bombs are on their side. I know exactly why that is, so we'll go fix that too, just because it's cleanup time. One of the things I gotta say, I truly love about Unreal in particular, but also just this era of engines, Unity, Unreal, Lumberyard, you name it, is, man, they let you skip so much BS and move to the fun stuff. We can knock stuff out at a really rapid pace, bug fixes or otherwise, in part because it handles a lot of the BS for it. Because it's often quite hidden, sometimes it can make things, feel like they're harder. Messing with physics properties, weird stuff happens, it's not super well documented, it works in exactly the one way that the programmer, artist, or whomever used it. At Epic, it works great in exactly that fashion, and if you try to do it in any natural way, it's creaky. That stuff can be a pain, but man, in general, it is so nice being able to sort of rapidly prototype and knock stuff out. I fundamentally changed projectiles over the course of 3 days. They're all pooled now. They do all that great stuff. It just wasn't that darn hard. There's other projects that would have taken a massive amount of time. Okay, so what we're going to do here is, man, I just lost my train of thought because I was so busy rambling, being a rambling man about it. Well, is there anything else I want to do with that too? Oh yeah, Rain of Bombs. Rain of Bombs. I forget what my spell is for that. So, what's a spell, and why act the way of spells in a post-apocalyptic game? Good call. A spell is not really a spell. There's no magic. It's never presented to the user as a spell. It's our way of saying, what's a cool thing to affect the world with? Because the words thing to affect the world with is too damn long to type in all the time. But spell's kind of short. So a spell can do things. We don't have a ton of them in the game right now. But rain items, that's a spell that basically what it does is that you pass it in a thing to rain, in this case a bomb, and it will spawn them all over the place. It spawns item like boom, boom, boom around the room. It's a consolidated way of saying make it rain these things. And why rain them? Yeah, they fall from the sky. There's an audience, watching you, and sometimes they do stuff like make it rain and coins or whatever pour from the sky. And so this is the spell that we use generically to do that kind of stuff. So in this particular case, we're spawning projectiles. I changed the rotation so they're not funky. I would have expected this custom scale MX to be weird. I would have expected to be that to be some other value. Now, I happen to know that there's 2 different spells that do very, very similar things. One's called Rain Bombs in Room, the other's the default. And so this one is set funky. You might say, hey Gaffer, why do you have 2 separate spells? Well, it's simple in one way, but it's complex in another. So, bombs get spewed out in a bunch of ways. You already saw our bomb gadget. That takes a box of boom and it turns it into explosive. By default, it's a anarchist bomb. You could pick up bomber. Now, you're firing out projectiles. You've seen our bombardier boss. He goes in a circle and spawns out bombs in like a circle around him. That's more projectile. He's firing in a normal way. He's doing an attack pattern, going and spawning stuff out. But there's two other things in the game that can make bombs rain from the sky. One of them is a carnage item. Carnage item, our version of active items. Once you collect enough carnage, you can hit a button and stuff falls from the sky. That's the item I'm using in the test room. And that one's called Rain of Bombs. But there's also an audience, a viewer challenge that can happen where they rain bombs down upon you. And so you might think, man, those things sound identical. Why would you ever make two spells? And I may well converge them at some point. I don't like having multiple code sets around. But the second version of that actually has a very minor tweak, which is that when I hit my carnage item, it rains bombs around the room, but not in a certain radius around me. So it drops bombs in a donut around me. Now, if you have the audience raining bombs on the room, they're like, screw that guy. It's just falling randomly in the room. So they might fall and you might not. So that's the difference between those two spells. They could be named a little better, but Rain Bombs and Rune is apparently the one that's being called, hey, it's almost like I could rename it right now and make it better. Let us call this Carnage Rain of Bombs, because that is what is actually doing it. GB, spell, Carnage item, Rain of Bombs. And now that's differentiated from the base rain items thing, which will get called something else. That's a sign of refactoring, where there should be, that is just the default behavior of that thing, but it's really set up so it could spawn anything. But by default, it rains bombs, and that's what's called by the viewer challenge. It calls that one. Okay, so we now have spell, CI, rain of bombs, yay! When we pick this up, we'll expect that we no longer have super giant bombs. But instead, we'll have nice happy bombs, little bombs that are regular sized. I don't know, it's possible this thing should do slightly bigger bombs. Ooh, invalid spellcast, what'd I break? Dude. This worked moments ago. How could I possibly have broken it? Can't be anything up here. Oh, you know why? You know why? It's because it's complex. But we have spawners. So we spawn mutations and stuff like that. And I just changed the fundamental thing that's being spawned. I need to update the spawners to be able to properly know about the new stuff that exists. Oh my god, that's so complex. What do I do? Well, I hit delete. And the game goes and restarts. And now this thing should go. And it does. Okay, so those are smaller bombs. Let's pop them up a little bit. Not quite as big as they used to be, but by a tad. L scale in Rain of Bombs. Carnage item Rain of Bombs. We're going to make you 1.25. We're going to just tap you up a bit. We know they're already 1.5 times bigger than they ought to be, so we don't want to have them be super ginormous. Rain of Bombs. Drop a bomb. I think that's a little bigger without being cartoonishly bigger, so we'll take that. Now, I will note, we all saw me change that thing to not have a funky rotation. Now, you're like, hey, Gaffney, why do you have a funky rotation at all? Well, you know why we have a funky rotation? It's because a child spell of this, there we go, missiles need to point downwards. 270 pitch. What's that mean? Boop, you're pointing downwards now, you're no longer pointing forwards. And nukes can rain on you as well. The audience, you'll note I've implemented the audience showering you explosives quite a bit. Showering you good stuff, not as much. We'll do some of that though. So let's go double test bombs blow up stuff, bombs bounce off things. We drop a bomb. Looks lovely. Drop a bomb while running through it, and we can hit it. All lovely. Rain of bombs. We can drop them. We can hit them. All beautiful. Oh, beautiful. We're going to be giant. We're going to drop a bomb. It didn't scale up because we don't drop giant things. Now, that's interesting. Apparently, when I fire a projectile... Oh, yeah, Big Shot does that. Big Shot scales up my projectiles that I fire directly as well. That's kind of interesting. So there's a little bit of a different behavior between this bomb projectile and the one that's fired by me, and I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? The foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of the proverbial little minds. So we're going to go boom, boom, boom. Those are lovely.
might scale this down with bubble on, but I'm not too keen with that. Saw blade is overcome by that. Boombadoo means we should be spawning. Let's go test that on a refresh and resetting things. Boombadeer. Boombadeer makes me spawn 2 bombs instead of 1 for when I drop a bomb. Now Boombadeer only changed my bomb gadget. I have not made it so that when you do Bomber and Boombadeer that it doubles, but I actually think it'd be kind of cool if it did. So you know what? Let's go do that. I don't mind doing that. Let's make a little synergy happen. So here's how we did that for, yeah, we're going to need to do this. We're going to need a bigger gun. I already did something similar for syringes. Syringes are projectile syringes. They throw little needles at you, and they infect you with buffs and stuff. The syringes for us are also gadgets. You can inject yourself. That's how I got Big Shot. It's a syringe. Boop, boop. So if you have low tolerance, that's a mutation that makes syringes have double effects. Well, because I'm all sexy-like, let's go make sure this works since I just fundamentally changed everything about it. Let's take our rain of bombs. Let's instead spawn a giant doctor boss who I happen to know will throw a lot of syringes around. And then let's move this over by me because the doctor is going to take up a lot of space. Let us spawn instead low tolerance. Let me also, while I'm at it, let's go take these big shots, move them over here. Let's make this be a different injector that's, big shot's good enough. So what I would expect for behavior is this. I will expect that I'm going to pick up this. This guy's firing syringes and whatnot around. If I hit him, they don't multiply. I can't hit laser bolts, but I can hit physical projectiles. Woo! Now if I have low tolerance, my expectation is when this guy fires syringes at me, they multiply. And they do. You see, I got double the effect out of that. They're all kind of stacked up on each other, so we'll do this in slow motion so we can really see what's going on. Slow motion. Now, these are overstacking because I just changed all scaling of these things. Look at that. All the syringes multiply because I have low tolerance. Kind of cool. Similarly, if I use this injector over here, a big shot, I would expect it to have double effects. I should be twice as big. Yes, I'm giant. Now you're fighting someone your own size. Oh, bam, he knocks me back. Oh, man, I'm so big I interpenetrate. You can see when I do crappy animations. Oh, man, he's beating me up. This guy's going to kill me, man. Now it's personal. I want to go take this guy out. Oh, bubble wand, that's useless. Oh, here I can spam him with... If only I had a giant harpoon. This dude, I'm going to so die here. Hit him with giant shots. Die. Giant shots still don't do a huge amount of damage. Now let's take this out of slow motion mode. Multi-kill. I am mighty. This is why I need to make sure Big Shot doesn't stack up quite that massively. It already gives you a big boost. Doubling it makes it like super massive. I do cap it, but I need to cap it at a smaller rate. You know, these little tiny shots are cool. It's called Big Shot because it makes you big. The audience loves you being a big shot, so it ups your it. You get more carnage and stuff out of things. And because it's Big Shot, it makes your shots bigger too, just because I'm being like a little clever. So, yeah, I'm big. But low tolerance makes that too big. So, I'll scale that down a little bit at some point. Boom, boom, boom. But, hey, when you can get this kind of crazy just in a test room from mucking around with stuff, I think that's pretty cool. Okay, I think that covers things pretty well. So let us recap. What we did is we did a little playthrough. We saw some stuff. We covered projectiles, talked about pooling and all the neat stuff we've done to make them efficient. We took Bomber, and we did a little bug fixing on it, where all those projectile changes had made it so scale was funky and things were off, and like the collision wasn't working quite right. And so we went and fixed all that so it works not just when they're spawned, but also now when they're spawned out of a pool, for efficiency. We made them scale better. We made them look kind of better when they're dropping from the sky and all that. That's how we did a pretty good bunch of cleanup for an hour. If every hour were that productive, well, we never ship because all we do is fix bugs like forever. But, that's the kind of rate where I'm like, when we could actually ship in our lifetimes, if we can keep on knocking stuff out at that rate. Now, I love making content even more where it's like, hey, let's do new stuff so future Gaffney can have to debug that instead of present Gaffney. So next week, I think we'll probably hit up, maybe just do some raw implementation, knock out a couple mutations, knock out maybe some new machines for the med lab, maybe some new creatures. We've got a bunch of new creature assets going in, so maybe all that. I'll be at GDC
early next week, but I'll be back in time for our regular Thursday, 5 p.m. Pacific time dev streams because we like it. So thank you very much for tuning in and for checking out our VOD. Next week, hopefully, we'll have Drake on board as well. Ninja last night had 600,000 simultaneous viewers with that. And so I'll see if I can get him on the show. Why not? Okay, thank you very much. We'll see you guys later, and thank you for watching our little presentation here on working on the dev stream for Gone Viral. Thank you.